Good evening. This video is about organizing files and pictures, also known as images, on your computer. I hope that you'll get some techniques that will save you some time when you're trying to do organization. I always find that it's easier to find things if they're somewhat organized, although I'll show you some examples that are the typical don't do as I do, do as I say. So we're going to start with the menu across the bottom. Whether you have a Mac or a PC, on the Mac it's called a dock, and on the PC, I guess it's just called a menu. I like the File Explorer, which looks like a folder. On a PC, it's called the File Explorer, and when I touch that icon, it opens up my computer to see the different options that are stored there. You'll notice that I have a quick access to the desktop, to my downloads folder, to my documents, and to my pictures. And it also brings up the last few folders that I've been in for quick access, figuring that I might want to go back to those. OneDrive is my connection to Microsoft Office, but I don't use it for storage. I use Google instead. It also lets me go into my PC in greater detail. Of course, there's the desktop again, and the documents and the downloads, but here's my music, pictures, which was there before, videos, if I have any saved, and then my full hard drive, which is known as C, and the D part, which is the recovery portion of that hard drive. So I could access all of that. The window over here is set up so that whatever I click on, so if I click on DKG, it shows me all the parts that are in that DKG folder. And up at the top, it tells me the path to get there. It says I'm on this PC, in the Documents folder, and then in a subfolder called DKG. And you will notice that I have a chapter folder, my Alpha Row folder. This is info for Adobe Suite. This is Creative Arts 2020, and the objects that we were going to sew at Creative Arts, and so forth down the list. So we'll talk a little more about that structure in a minute. But what I wanted you to see is about file extensions, because file extensions can help you a lot if you're trying to group different types of files together. So I'm going to open this Northeast Regional Sessions, and I picked this one to open because it has a variety of files in there, and I wanted you to see how the extensions help. An extension is simply an extra ending. In other words, this very first file here is called Google Apps. It's a picture. It's a PNG file. The second one is also a picture. Let me open that so that you can see that in fact it is a picture. Notice? It's a picture. It's a picture I took of the Google menu, and I used it in a document that I created for this workshop at the Northeast Regional. This is a docx, also known as a Word doc. This is that same document converted to PDF. Numbers 4, 5, and 6 are the description of each of the breakout sections that was written up in the brochure for the Northeast Regional. Here's my notes for the session. That's a document in Word. Here's my notes for the session that I converted to PDF. And here is the Smart Notebook file that I used in one of the sessions. Notice it ends in Notebook. So those extensions let me know what it is. Now, over here under File Type, it also tells me what it is. So in reality, I really don't need this .notebook at the end, and I usually have that turned off, but I turned it on so that you could see the difference. If you open your computer and you see these extensions and you know what they are, you can look at them here, or you can go over here and read. You would need to know that a PNG file is a picture. Obviously, Microsoft Word, Word, Adobe Acrobat. And if I go up to the top here and click where the menu is, I can drag that so it's a little wider, and it tells me that this is an Adobe Acrobat document. And then this Smart Notebook file. It also tells me the size. And that's because I have this set on properties. Up here at the top menu, I have it set on properties. I could remove the properties, and if I do that, it asks me if I really want to do that. I'm not going to but it does ask me. So that's how come I can see all of that. And again, I can turn that off. Now I'm not going to walk you through how to turn that off. There are some notes in the handout. I believe they're at the bottom of the first page. They have a little asterisk beside them, and it talks about how you turn them on. A Macintosh, by design, an Apple product, does not let you see these regularly. However, I did put instructions in your handout. If you want to see them in an Apple product, you can on your Macs. You use the Finder to do that, and on the Windows PC, you use the control panel. So there's a little bit of a difference there in how you get those to show. But I did want to let you see what I'm talking about. Now, the reason I bring all that up is that, again, you need to know, have a basic knowledge of what those extensions mean. So in your handout, and by the way, if you didn't get the handout, we will be posting that at some point, or you can just send me an email, jean.tulin@gmail.com, and I will send you a copy of the handout. The handout is very short, and it's not real pretty because it's mostly about information, and a lot of it is all of it is what I'm going to say tonight, but I wanted you to have something after the fact, so if you just want to look one thing up, you don't have to go watch the whole video. So picture extensions are things like JPG, JPEG, PNG, GIF. GIF stands for GIF, and I could tell you what all of those stand for. Just let you know that JPG stands for Joint Photographic something. Maybe PG is photographic. Anyway, so knowing those, and of course the doc you're familiar with, and the same with PDF, is portable document file. So I wanted you to know about that, because then that helps you when you're sorting to know what I'm looking for. For example, here I had two documents that have the same name. Why do they have the same name? Well, they have the same name because one is the original and the other is the PDF that I converted so that anyone can open it, not just those who have Word on their computer. So that's what I wanted you to know about that, and that's what we start with. The other thing I wanted you to know is that just because 1 and 2 up here are pictures, they're not going to be treated any differently. They're just a file. It's a picture file, but they're just a file. And so there is no difference between, are you dealing with pictures or are you dealing with documents and other kinds of things like video and Smart Notebook files. So let's talk about each of these. How did they get the names? Well, maybe I saved them with that name. I did a file save as and I typed in the name. But maybe I went back later after I downloaded the images or took those pictures, or I did the files, and I decided to add more to it. So any one of these names can be changed because I'm going to right-click on it. And when I right-click on it, I get the option to rename. And now I can go in and we'll just change that to a capital A just so that you can see that it does make a difference. So it doesn't matter if it's a picture, it doesn't matter if it's a document, you can go in and change the name by simply right-clicking on it and going down to rename in the list, and then you can change that name. Notice it doesn't let you change the extension, and the reason you can't change the extension is because you're not changing the type of file it is, you're just changing the name of the file. So I wanted you to know about that, and I want you to realize that the extension lets you know, in this case, docx, PDF, and my example on the handout was if you have something named frog.jpg, that means that's a picture, probably, of a frog. But if it's called frog.doc, then that's a paper document, Word document, about frogs, probably. And that brings us to the whole thing about putting names on different files, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So if you're following along with the handout, I'm turning to page 2, but you don't have to have the handout in front of you. You can simply take your own notes if you would like. And I do want you to know that we're going to practice during this video. So I'm going to tell you to pause the video, and then I'll tell you what I want you to practice for a few minutes before you resume the video, because this is really important that you go through the motions after I've demonstrated them. We're not going to do that rename thing. We'll do that in a minute when I've shown you a couple of other things. So once you have decided that you want to do some organization of your files, then it's up to you to decide, what do you want to do? How do you want those to be organized? So I'm going to open a Smart Notebook file, and that Smart Notebook file, I've made a little graphic. And here is the graphic that I've made. And I need to make this so that you can see the whole thing. This graphic is a good way, and you could just draw this out on paper. I just happen to have this file order or tool that lets me make boxes real quickly and type in titles and make them colors so that they're separate. So you will notice that I start in my Documents folder, and then within the Documents folder, I have a file folder for all of these things. And we'll go back and talk about how we make folders in a minute. And then I did one of them. So let's say that this is my bills and my pay stubs of when I pay my bills. I pay everything online. I save every item that says you've paid this bill on such and such a date. I save those. I print them as a PDF. And so then I put them in this bills paid folder. But I have a file for inside there for the phone, another one for my various insurances. I have one for electric bill. I have one for the cable. And I just keep throwing those in there all the time. Notice under the insurance folder, I have cars and house insurance and medical insurance. And then in the cars folder, I have different cars that we have at our house, so I can keep track of which one that I do, although technically all 4 cars are on the same policy. But I might maybe make that maintenance of the cars. I don't take care of that. My husband does, so that's why I don't have that. But I was just trying to show you, and this is a good example of don't do as I say, do as I do, because I will show you my bills folder. My receipts folder looks like this. And these are my receipts from, I wish they were my receipts from 12/20, 11/20, and so forth. I spilled a whole cup of tea with creamer on my computer a couple weeks ago, and my new one arrives tomorrow because they can't get anything off of it. So that folder is empty. There may be something in this one. Oh, there we go. That's what I wanted to do. All of my August bills are in there, and then my September and so forth. And I'll get there. And we haven't gotten to September yet. But that's a way to organize those. I want to see if I have, bear with me for a minute, in fact. I'm going to pause the video for a minute. Okay, so here's a good example of what not to do. Some of you know that we have a vineyard at our house, and this happens to be where I store things about the vineyard. It's not my project, it's my husband's project, but I end up keeping the records. So here is a folder, and this is a Word file, and these are obviously pictures and more Word files down here, and there is nothing in that folder that's organized. And so I have, and it's also showing you pictures rather than a list. And so I like to see a list, and I have to go to the View folder. And when I go to the View option at the top of the page, you will notice that right now it's in large icons. But if I drop down to Details, that's when I see the file with the extension. I see when it was last used. I see the kind of file it is. I see the size. If I just do List, then I only see the list. And it does allow me to have more things on the page, but I don't see the details. And of course, you could always go with small icons, which is probably one that I like pretty well unless I'm looking for something. So how would I go about organizing this folder? I've already done my structure, and it is Documents and then Vineyard. And that's all it is. It's not multiple layers, but let's talk about how I would make those multiple layers. So I need some folders. So there are 2 ways to make a folder. One way is to click out here in the side. I'm over here on the side where there's an empty space, and I'm going to right-click on your Mac. That's probably 2 fingers, and I'm going to go down here to New, and I'm going to go to folder. And now I can call that grape, whoops, got to spell right, grape picks. And another one would be, another one I could do would be, I'd probably just call it paperwork for now. I don't have any reason to have anything else. So I'm going to call it paperwork, new, folder, and call it paperwork. Now, if, it does help if I spell it right, if I want, one of the things that's in this file is labels that I make to put on bottles. So I could put a folder inside of that folder called new and labels. I think there are some other paperwork items in there, but we'll see those when we get there. So let's go back to Vineyard. So you have to decide your structure. If you already have a structure started, I wouldn't change it unless you're just not happy with it. And literally what I do in that case, if you look, I have up here, I have from my external hard drive. This is from external HD. I have somewhere else, I have another one of those. I'm not seeing anything else. Inside there we have some things that I brought from my external hard drive after my computer that I had before this one took a dive. So you can do that. My Delta Kappa Gamma folder has evolved over time. You notice it's one big folder with Delta Kappa Gamma. If I open my Alpha Rho folder, which is my chapter, I have in there, I have a news folder for every year. I have, here's Alpha Rho 09, Alpha Rho Site, those, and Alpha Rho Site 2014. Those all have to do with when we started a website and when I've revamped it over time. Here's some questions to ask Sherry. I don't even know what's in there, but Sherry was the co-president when I was co-president the first 2 years, so I probably had questions for her. You'll notice this says book 1920. Real soon I'll be doing the book for 2021. And down here somewhere, I got tired of having all the book, because I had a book for every year that I've been doing the book. And so now I have a folder called Old Yearbooks. And you will notice that starting in '08 is when I did the first book, and I have every one if I ever need to go back and look it up. And I have newscasters. I have the news and views from my chapter for every year, some of which I wrote and some of which somebody else has written. I don't know why I keep those, because probably we could get rid of a lot of those. Here are the years I was president. So I have some folders. And then I've got this lovely list down here of things that aren't anywhere. They're just in, and you'll see that it's pretty extensive. Is that the right way to keep things in a folder? Probably not. I would have you notice, however, that there is this lovely little box up in the upper corner that says Search Alpha Rho. That means it will only search this folder. So if I was let's say I'm looking for a letter. You'll notice this says Letters for Embosser. Now, that has a PNG file at the name, so that tells me right away this isn't a letter. This is a picture. And I'll show you what that is so that you can see. There they are. And so we had an embosser made, and that was, we did some note cards, and that was the letters for that. So I try to give them names that make sense. Membership roster with years. So that's my chapter's membership roster, and we keep track of who went in what year and so forth. So we have all sorts of things, and that's what I'm talking about on page 2 in the handout. Number 1, set up your structure. How do you want it to look? Let's go back to that visual that I had. Here's something for the house, but what if we went to the next page? What if you were at school? If you were to see my documents folder when I was teaching school, I made up a folder one year. Let's say it wasn't 17-18, but I made one up that year, and I made up a structure, and I put every class I was teaching in there. And in each of those folders, I put quarters. Now, I only took the time to do that for geometry, but I had those same 4 quarters in Algebra 2, the same 4 quarters in Pre-Calc, the same 4 quarters in Trig. And then within each quarter, I listed the chapters that were done in that quarter. Now, here's the great news. Once you get your first folder set up, especially at school, if you're teaching the same subjects the next year, or maybe changing 1 or 2, you could simply right-click, make a copy, and then go over in space and paste it. I'll demonstrate that when we get back to the files. So you have that option for just copying the folder and then using the structure that you had the previous year and adding more to it, and adding more to it the next year as you make a copy of that folder. So you don't, the good news is, as long as you're not teaching something new, you don't have to change the structure. And to be honest, if you were teaching something new, the quarters wouldn't change. What's in the quarters would change. Algebra 2 might not be Algebra 2 anymore. It might be basic math, but we'd still need quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. So just keep that in mind, that for schools, if you organize it, then you can find it. And more than likely, this won't be on your computer. It'll be either in your Google Drive or on your school server somewhere on a shared drive for others to see. But I did want you to see that that's a little different when you're doing it for school. Okay? So I'm going to minimize that. And so now we're going to talk about names. And I already mentioned it a little bit. In your handout, at the bottom of page 2, I talked to you about names. You can't call it as I mentioned there, you can't call it birthday 1, birthday 2, birthday 3. Well, you could, but if you do, then you don't know what's in the picture without opening it up. And so I want to go back to that folder I was on earlier. The folder I was in earlier was this Northeast Regional, and it had those 2 pictures up here at the top. They're only at the top because it's in alphabetical order. And while we're here, let's remind you, up here there's a little triangle at the top of the word name. Watch what happens if I click that. They're now in reverse alphabetical order, and the arrow is pointing down. If I decide, rather than having them in order by name, I want to have them in order by type. So when I hit type, notice it put the Adobe documents at the top, alphabetical, then it put the Microsoft Word, then it put the PNG, and then the Smart Notebook file. Maybe I want to have them in order by date modified. You can click that date, and now it's put them order with the date modified. And this is about the time that my previous computer crashed, so none of this has been touched since the summer of 2017, when I had to get this off of my old computer with the help of a tech guru in town, and he got it off, and we were able to save a lot of it. So that's real useful when you're looking for something. Put things in order by name, put things in order by type, put things in order by date modified. So I'm going to put these back in order by just clicking at the top, and that puts them in order, and the arrow's pointing up. If I click it again, the arrow's down. I click it again, the arrow's back up. So it's going from Z all the way up to A. In this case, only goes as far as G. But you want to give things names so you know what they are. So this is Jean Tulin number 1 breakout, Jean Tulin number 2 breakout, and Jean Tulin number 3 breakout. But you'll notice that I have a 3 and a 1 and a 5 there, because I wanted to remind myself that this is even though in the book they were called number 1, 2, and 3, this one was in the first segment of the day, this one was in the third segment of the day, and this one, I believe, was in the 5th segment of the day. Now, why are those 1s there with parentheses? Well, that's because at some point I had 2 copies of this file in the folder at the same time. And so it thought that I had to give it a different name, so it added that parenthesis behind it. And let's see if we can force that to happen again. If I copy that file, and then I go down here, I right-clicked and copied, and now I'm going to go here and right-click and paste. And notice it called it a copy of. And if I take that copy of out of there, Let's see what it does. Notice it says, do you want to rename this as from this? And now what's it going to do? Because I have made the two names identical, it automatically gives it a 2 behind it so that I know that these are the exact same thing. This is copy 1 and copy 2. So it's trying to help you out by not overlapping one file with the other when you give them the same name. Just wanted you to know what those parentheses are. So be sure you read through that and get a general thought about how you're going to name files, and always give them something that you can find so that if you need to search for it, you can either go to Documents, and let's just see what happens when I type in Google App. And it comes up and it shows me that I have a Google App PNG, which is the one that I just looked at. I have using Google Apps. I have using Google Apps, which is a smart file. This one, I'm not sure why that says Michael Jones. This one just has Google Apps as a document file. And so it's showing me that I have other Google Apps to search for. And if I hit return right here, then it brings all those up anywhere it mentions Google Apps right here. Google Apps PNG, there's Google Drive, and so it lets me find those things. I'm going to use this left arrow. I'm going to go back to here, but I wanted you to see that. So that helps you, number one, for a reason to name files with something that you can remember. Name them what they're about so that when you're looking for the file about Google, all you have to do is type in the word Google and it'll help you find them. So keep that in mind. All right, we're now going to go to some techniques that you're going to practice with. You're going to do two things when I turn you loose to practice. One, you're going to find a file. You're going to, on your computer, I don't care what file it is, you might want to make it in some folder that you can make a slight change to. You're going to go in and you're going to change the name on a file. And it may be nothing more than change a lowercase letter to a capital letter, but I want you to practice that a couple of times so that you can right-click on that and then change that file name in some way. The second thing we're going to do, you've already seen me do that a couple of times. The second, oh, by the way, you can change folder names too. Let's say that I want to change this one. It says Grant App for Candy. It was an application that I filled out for one of our members. So I go right-click again and rename, and it brings up that file name, and I'll just change that A to a capital so that you can see that, in fact, I did change the folder name as well. So these are folders, and then as I scroll down, here are the files that aren't in folders down here. Okay? So now we're going to talk about these techniques. These techniques are talked about on page 3, and they are very useful when you're trying to organize a lot of files at once. Okay? So I'm going to create a folder here called New because I don't want to mess up my file structure and move these into the wrong folder. So I'm going to call this New. And I'm going to create a second folder called New 2. And you can create something with a little more thought, but I have a file structure that I like, so I don't want to mess it up. So there's my New and my New 2. So we're going to collect files. There are two ways to collect file, and they involve the Control key on your computer or the Shift key. We're going to do the Control key first. There's a sample of using the Control key at the top of page 3. The Control key lets you pick and choose what you want. So I'm going to demonstrate, and then I want you to wait a minute, and I'll demonstrate the other one, and then you can try them both. So the first option is that you click on the first file that you want to collect. So I clicked on that one called Air Balloons. And now I'm going to hold the Control key down, and I'm going to click on this Facebook note, and I'm going to go down here and click on this PDF, and I'm going to go down here and click on this logo, and I'm going to click on this car info. Oh, I don't really want that car info. I'm going to uncheck that by clicking it again, and now it's off. So you click it to turn it on. And here's the handout for tonight. We'll just click on that, Organizing Files and Pictures handout. So I have 5 photos collected. So now I can do something with those. If I want, I could drag them all. Now notice the technique for dragging. We're not going to do this yet, but I notice what I want you to see. I put my cursor over one of the blue areas. Doesn't have to be all of them. I can't put it over all of them. You put it over one of the blue areas. You hold down your mouse and you drag. And you will notice, if you look carefully, I'm getting a thing that says open with. I don't want that, and we're going to talk about what I'm doing here later, and we're not going to do anything with this now. But I want you to see that all those files that I selected are here in this bundle, and I can move that somewhere. I could even move it over here. I'm not going to, but I could. So that's our purpose in learning this technique. So to turn it off, you simply click in space somewhere, and now they're all off. Now that can be a negative. If you by accident click somewhere, let's say I click on this first one and I hold my control key down and I click on the second, and then I go down here and click on the fourth and I click on the sixth, and all of a sudden by accident I click, if I'm still holding the shift key down, I'm good. I've got my shift key down and I just keep adding things to my list. Remember, this is called pick and choose. I could even pick this whole folder up here. So all of those things that are highlighted in blue are now selected. And I could move them somewhere else through the techniques I'm going to show you later. I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to click in space so they're all turned off. But be careful. You want to make sure that you don't click off when you really want them to be on. So that's number one at the top of page 3. It's called pick and choose. You click on the first item. My hands, you can't see them, but my hands are not on the keyboard. I used my mouse. I clicked on the first item. Now you put a finger on the control key, and then you pick and you choose what you want. But you'll notice that it just keeps adding more to it. Whatever I click on gets added to my group. That's called pick and choose, and it uses control. All right, what else do we have? Well, our second technique is what's known as first, last, and everything in between. So let's say that I have decided that this 75th anniversary fax and everything all the way down to knit or crochet a disc scrubby directions for car. Let's say that I want everything. I want the first one, I want that last one, and everything in between. So the technique starts out similar to pick and choose. You click the first one, you hold down the shift key, and you click the last one. And you will notice that not only did I get the first one and the last one, but I got everything in between. Now I can drag those wherever I want. It doesn't matter if it's files, like you see here, or I could do that with folders. Let's say I click the Alpha Row folder, I hold down the Shift key, I click the Go to Meeting folder. I got the first, I got the last, and everything in between. And now I can do something with that group. But be careful, don't click anywhere else, because if I take my finger off, I've got my finger off, you can't see that, but I've got my finger off the Shift. Now when I click down here, it's gone. So you have to be careful not to click by accident. I click the first, I hold the Shift, and while I'm holding the Shift, I click on that folder. And now it's everything in between, including those first and last folders. And now I can do something with those. All right, I'm going to pause, and I would like you to, number one, open a folder, or maybe just your documents folder, and I'd like you to right-click on a folder or a file and change its name in some way. Don't change it so unless it's such a bad name that you know it needs a better name. Change that name. How do you get off of it after you've changed the name? If I go here and I click on images, notice my other highlighting is gone. If I right click on it and I go to rename, now I click on images and I change the I to a capital I. And I haven't really changed the folder yet. I've just given it a little capitalization. So once you've done it, then you can click somewhere else and it'll turn it off. Okay? So I'm going to put you on pause, and I want you to go in and find a file or a folder and change the name by right-clicking. Then I want you to practice with your control key. Click on a file, hold control, and click on several more files that are not together in a list, meaning one's number 3, and then you skip down to number 7, and then you go to number 9, or something like that. And see how those are collected. And then finally, click on a first or a second, hold down the Shift key. I'm clicking on the 6th one in this list. Hold down the Shift key. Now I'm clicking clear down here, and it collects all those in between. Okay? And then click in space, and that will turn all that off. So I'm going to put you on hold here, on pause, and I'd like you to practice that. Take 10 or 15 minutes, come back, restart the video, and we'll go from there. All right, so I hope you've been successful and you've been able to practice with using the Shift key and using the Control key. So now it's time to do some organization. So I'm going to go back to that folder that I had open earlier. Let's do this one from the extended hard drive. That's not going to help me. I forgot what folder I was at. I apologize. Let's just do my Delta Kappa Gamma folder, and I have all this down here. Okay? Oh, yeah, and remember I made a new and a new 2. So let's say that I want to put all the pictures that end in GIF or PNG or JPEG into that new folder. So they're not all together. So I could click on the first one here, and then I could hold Control down, and I could click, this is a PNG, this is a JPEG. I can click down to find another one. There's one, meeting level map, JPEG. I need to go over here and pull this down. Be careful when you do that, because if you click over here in white space, you'll turn everything off. So you've got to make sure you've got your cursor on that gray bar. Oh, here's another red star. Here is anything else. I don't see a thing else there. All right, so I have all my files that I want to use. So I'm going to take my finger off of Control. I'm going to drag this up so I can see I have 5 files. And I'm going to, and this is on page 4. There are 2 ways to do this. Option 1, I'm going to drag these to that new folder. And you'll notice as I pick them up, there's 5 of them there. It tells me there's 5 of them. And when I put my cursor right over the top of the new folder, it says Move to New. If I put it over New 2, it says Move to New 2. So it tells me where it's going to move it, and I drop them. They are no longer down here at the bottom. They are now in the new folder. So that's one option. Another option, and we'll do this with the second group, I'm going to take all the docs. So I'm going to take this doc, I'm going to hold the Control key down, and I'm going to take this doc. And keep in mind, I'm not doing any sorting here. I'm just doing them as I would do if I had some plan in place. So I have a doc there. I have another doc here. I have a doc here. I have another one here. And it looks like that's it. So this is option 2 on page 4. I've got them all selected. So instead of dragging them up there, I could right-click and cut. It's down here. So I've cut them. Now they haven't cut yet, but they will in just a minute. Now I'm going to go up here to New 2, and I'm going to open that, and in space, I'm going to right-click and paste. And now those files are all in that folder. If I go back here, those files are no longer down here. There are no docs except this one right here that I missed by accident, but all the other docs are gone. Okay? Now, as you might guess, the same technique works if I want to travel files to another folder. And the way you do that to get a second window open, to a second window, is you go down to the folder on this computer. It's called the File Explorer. On a Mac, it's called the Finder. And you right-click, and you choose File Explorer. When you do that, you get another File Explorer window. So now I have two File Explorer windows. And so I'm going to go to Documents, and I'm going to create a new folder called New 3. And there it is. And I'm going to open it. So this is the empty space where I want to put some things. Over here are some files that maybe I want to try there. So I'm going to click on the first one, hold my control key down, click on these other Word or Smart Notebook files that are there, and then I'm going to drag them over to this other window all the way over here, and you'll notice that the directions say moving to New 3. And when I drop them, they're all there. It says this action can't be completed because this file is open. So I'm going to say skip. I'll have to do that one later. So it did move the 3 that weren't open, but it left the organizing one that's still open because that's the file that I had open earlier with this. And so it won't let me move it because then it wouldn't know where to find it. So notice I use that drag technique. What if I want to add some more to it? We'll use the shift technique. So I press and hold on that file, hold my shift key down, and I go all the way to the bottom and click on that. Whoops, I did something wrong. Click on the first, hold the shift key down, all the way to the bottom. Now, I have two options. I can simply grab those and drag them over, or I could right-click. If you use keystrokes, I can cut these, and then I can go over here. Notice they're not cut yet until I paste them. And I can click in space, and I can either right-click and paste, or if you know your keystrokes, that's a Control and a V. And when I do that, it brings those over. And again, I'm trying to copy that file that I still got open, so we'll skip that. But it does put the rest of them over here. And so now I've moved everything out of my DKG folder. And certainly after this video, I'll move it all back so I don't lose anything. But you can see that you can move between files either because you're just moving them into a window in the folder they're already in, or you can have two windows open and you can drag them across to the window that you want to put them in. And that means you can have multiple files open. The last thing we could do is to grab something. Let's just do this one. I don't know what's in here. I could grab it here, and I could do multiples. Use my shift key, hold this down, do multiples, and then I could drag them over here and put them in the new folder. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to lose those, but that's where that is. So that technique is the drag and drop or the cut and paste method. And so that's highlighted on page 4 of your handout, and that lets you practice. I would suggest strongly that you do some practice over time. This is an especially useful tool when you are trying to organize to share files with someone else. But keep in mind, and I'm just going to use that technique that I used a minute ago. I want to put these back, and you might recall that those were in my DKG folder, so I'm going to hold the first one, hold my shift key, whoops. Notice I clicked twice, and so I got the option of naming it. There it is. I'm going to hold my shift key down, click the last one, and now I'm going to drag those right back over here to that DKG folder so I don't lose those out of there. And then I'm going to clean up my documents by right-clicking on News 3, and I'm going to delete that folder because there's nothing in it. I have 2 more folders that I'll clean up later, but I wanted you to see how that works with making folders in the same folder. Remember, the new and the new 2 were in the same folder where these files were, and the other new 3 was in a different area of my computer, and so that's why I had to open 2 windows. So now I'm going to pause, And the next thing will be that for you to try practice that. And then come back and let's hear about your successes and maybe a failure or two. And it does take a little bit of coordination with your mouse to be able to do that. So, by way of refresher, this is a page in your handout. I think it's, I know it is, it's page number 3. And just a reminder that you can select items using your control key, and at the bottom, click on the first file, hold down the shift, click on the last, and that'll give you a group. There is one more technique that is useful if you've got a lot, especially pictures. You've got a whole group of pictures, and you don't want to have to sort through them all. They're all from, say, your daughter's wedding or a baby shower or something like that. It works like this. Here's my picture file. And let's say that I look at this and I see all these, and I just want to throw them in a folder, not because they have any special meaning. I just am tired of looking at them when I open this folder. So I could take my control key and I could hold down and I could click on this one and then this one and so forth. I could also do this. I could go to the top under the View menu, and I could put them in order by details. And then I could click on the first one, because they're in order by details, and they're all pictures. I could go all the way to the bottom, hold down my shift, click on them all. And then I could either drag them into a folder, or I could right-click and cut them, and then paste them somewhere else. Another option is this, and sometimes it takes less time to do this. On your keyboard, the control key held down with an A will select all. You'll notice that you can't see me, but I held down the control key, take my word for it, and then I pressed the letter A. And when I did that, it selected everything in the file. But what if there's a couple that I don't want? I want this 2D shape and B and C words. I don't want those. So I hold down my control key again. Remember, it lets me pick and choose. So I'm unchoosing those first 3. Now I have everything I want except those first 3. So now I can drag those wherever I want, or I can control copy or control cut. Now keep in mind, if you copy, it leaves a copy here and it puts another one in the new folder, and that's taking up double space. So my advice would be pretty much cut when you can, and don't hesitate to use Control V for paste, Control X for cut, Control C for copy. Okay, I'm going to click in space so those are turned off. That takes a look at that. The page 4 was about dragging and dropping, and it reminds you that you can have 2 windows side by side and drag them. If you're worried about how do I get a window to be the size so that I can fit them both on the page, one option, I'm going to go down here and open this. One option is that if it opens full page, and you can't see this because my video is not recording this, but if I go up here and hit this little icon, it makes it a smaller window. You can drag that like this on the side, so you can make those 2 windows side by side if you would like. Here's my other window, and so now I have them side by side. There are some other options, but that's probably the easiest to do it that way. Okay? And then, of course, the bottom of that page talks about copy and paste. That brings us to the last page in the handout. Keep in mind that these techniques work when you're going between folders on your computer. But if you're moving from a USB drive that's plugged in and you move the file from the USB, you cut it and you move it, it then will no longer be on the USB because you moved it. So I suggest strongly what it says here. When you are going from a different folder on the computer to another folder on the computer, cut and move work fine. But if you've got a file on a USB drive, which is outside the computer, and you're moving it to something inside, it will move it totally off of the USB drive. So keep that in mind. Read through that a couple times. Make sure you understand that. I suggest that you always copy. Now, here's what the problem is. You will take a look at my folders. I always make a copy. Well, guess what that does? That fills things up. So if I go over here and I go down to my C drive and I right-click on C drive and I go to Properties, here's the problem. I have 223 gigabytes of space used in 239. That's not right. Somewhere I'm off here. Hold on a second. But I don't have much space yet left. There we are. I've used 206 out of 223, and I have 16 gigabytes left. Notice how I did that. I put my cursor on the C drive here, and I right-clicked and I went to Properties. And when I went to Properties, it shows me my used space and my free space. And I'm getting to the point where this hard drive is just about full. And that's a disaster if you get it too full. Things don't always go well. My new one arrives tomorrow, and I will pull off of this one what I want. I had to combine my old stuff onto this computer, which I don't use much anymore. But again, keep that in mind. That's what copy does, because I have copy after copy after copy. And that means that I've taken up double and triple and quadruple space. So be judicious about what you copy. Well, that sums it up. Again, if you didn't get the handout, send me an email at jean.tulin@gmail.com, and I hope this is useful to you as you organize on your computer.